All right, this is the second half of our Intro to Healing with Herbs class. The first half was held last month at our October activity. Links to both classes will be available so that you can review this and watch it again if you need to. So in the last class, let's see, I taught 2 guiding principles and 1 key to understanding how to unlock herbal medicine. The 2 guiding principles are always treat for the underlying cause and for the symptoms you're having right now. And treat early, often, and after. Once you start incorporating herbs into your life, and some people are just very sensitive to what their bodies are saying. Using herbs, I think, heightens that sensitivity, because if you're trying to treat things early, you are very aware of that first little hint of a scratchy throat, or when you start to feel the little bit of pressure in your head and you think maybe you're coming down with something, that is when you start taking herbs. You will find that if you start early, you will either knock it out, and you'll say, a few days later, you'll say, I thought I was coming down with something, but I guess I wasn't. Well, you probably were, but you just knocked it out. If the illness does develop, taking herbs early and often will shorten the duration of the illness and lessen severity of symptoms. Sarah had an experience with this just recently. I have taught all of my kids, you take herbs early, you take them often, they know exactly what to do. About 2 weeks ago, she started coming down. Was it 4 weeks? Okay, about 4 weeks ago, she says. She started coming down with something and she said, Mom, I'm going to try an experiment. I'm going to manage this with over-the-counter just things to manage the symptoms. And I'm going to see if herbs really do make a difference. Because what is your normal time when you're taking herbs? What does your normal sickness look like, Sarah?
3 days.
3 days. Okay. So tell us how managing it with over-the-counter products and not taking any herbs, tell us how that worked for you. Okay. So basically, I think after 9 or 11 days, I asked her, well, how is that working for you? And she said, I am never doing that again. So she could see a difference, because at my house, when people say they're sick, that means they have the sniffles for 3 days. Nobody misses school. Nobody misses work. That's sickness at our house. We very rarely do the in bed, missing school, missing work. We just don't get that sick. It does happen occasionally, but generally speaking, my kids think they're dying if they're blowing their nose repeatedly for a few days. But treating the underlying cause and treating the symptoms you're having right now is a major key. And we're going to kind of get into the nuts and bolts of looking at different illnesses that we commonly see in our homes and kind of identifying, okay, what are the symptoms? What would you give for that? What are the underlying causes likely to be? So we're going to really dig into the nuts and bolts of that. Okay, the key. You can understand this one principle. The key to using herbs effectively is to know what you are trying to accomplish, and then be able to select from herbs that have the action that you're trying to accomplish. For example, there are a very specific set of herbs that will take mucus out of the body. Okay, if you have a mucousy cough or your head is full of mucus, you need to know, number one, that there are herbs with that action, and you need to have some kind of a reference where you can find a list of what those are. So you have to be able to know what the categories are, what do herbs do in your body, and then be able to choose from those. One of the amazing things, though, is that if you start looking at the list of categories and what herbs are in the individual categories, you will see herbs that show up repeatedly in the same categories. So you don't need, if you can identify what those overlaps are, that limits what you have to worry about trying to put in your herbal medicine cabinet. Combining herbs with different actions will help you get the results that you want. When you see an herbal blend that is a combination of herbs, that's why there's a combination of herbs, because they are combining herbs with different actions. So one of the things that, if you're kind of testing your knowledge, you can pick up something that will say like liver detox blend or respiratory blend. And if you're familiar enough with the herbs, you can go through the ingredients of that and you can identify why each of those herbs is there. That helps you in taking the herbs that you have at home and making your own blends instead of having to buy a product all the time. But that is the key. Understand that there are categories of therapeutic actions and know what herbs are in those categories. Okay, so the handout that you have, this is not a comprehensive list. I just tried to keep it to one page for the purposes of our class today, but most of the main categories are listed here. There's not too many more that aren't on here. I listed for each category, I listed a handful of the most common herbs that are in that category. And you can even look just on this list and start seeing certain herbs that are coming up over and over again. And it seems overwhelming to learn the terminology and to learn all the herbs, but it's no different than, learning to play an instrument or anything where you're having to learn something new. So in this class, we're going to use this handout to experiment using the different therapeutic categories of herbs to address common conditions. And then I'm going to have time at the end for a question and answer. And then I just have, over time, you will develop your own favorite things that you like to do. Oh, this is my go-to for colds, and this is what I do. So over the years, I've just kept track of my favorite protocols, and I just have shared some of those with you because there is some trial and error to experimenting with putting the herbs together. So the more we can learn from each other, that just shortens our learning curves. Okay, so we're going to start. Athlete's foot or foot fungus. Okay, that's something with teenage boys. I've dealt with that several times. So if you remember that the standard is you address the underlying cause and then you deal with the symptoms right now. So what is the underlying cause if you've got athlete's foot? And you can, this is yell it out. Just yell it out.
Fungus in the shower.
Okay, so you've got a fungus. Okay, so look on your handout. What category of herbs would we be taking for that? And then name one. And I'm going to give you time to do this because this is all new information. I've been told I go too fast during this part of the class. So I'm really going to just take your time.
The antiviral or the antibacterial.
Okay, look just a little bit lower down the list. You are on the right track.
Antifungal number 23.
Yeah, we know that the underlying cause is the fungus. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is reach for an antifungal herb. There's several here listed. Does it matter which one you use?
Some might be stronger than others.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to kind of trial and error or look into them.
One of the things that I mentioned in the earlier slide is that if you know every category of herbs has rock stars. The ones that are like the first, okay, know the rock stars in the categories. So yeah, you're going to reach for an antifungal. Now, a lot of people will say, well, if I have something that's manifesting on the outside, like a rash or like athlete's foot, where there's a very distinct physical symptom, do I treat that topically or do I take something internally? What would your guess?
Outside, topically.
Okay.
I would think topically.
Okay. So generally speaking, whenever you have something manifesting on the outside of the body, generally the underlying cause is internal.
That
Okay.
makes sense.
So
When I said that, I thought.
So what I would do anytime where I have a rash or something that I can see on the outside, I'm gonna do both. I'm gonna treat internally always. And then I'm gonna address it topically. So for an antifungal, if I'm treating athlete's foot, I'm going to choose like tea tree oil. That's obviously an external thing because it's an essential oil. You generally do not want to take essential oils internally unless you really, really know what you're doing, because some of them can kill you. Yeah, they're too strong. Plus, you have to pass through the system to get into the circulatory system, and that destroys a lot of qualities anyway. Okay, so let's just say that I have, Oregon grape. Okay, I'm just gonna grab that. I will have tinctured it, which means I will have soaked it in alcohol and strained off the liquid after 2 weeks, and that's the medicine. So if I'm mixing a blend together, I'll probably just take an empty little amber bottle, like you can buy. Put in a few drops of that as my base with Oregon grape. Now, with antifungal, that's actually probably all I would use internally. I'm not going to mix a bunch of things together for that one, but for future ones, we will see mixing herbs together. But then externally, I'm probably going to have put a few drops of like tea tree oil or an antifungal essential oil in a foot bath and be soaking. So I'm getting it from both sides. Typically speaking, if you're dealing with essential oils, those are external, right? And then your herbs are going to be internal. If I don't have any antifungal essential oils, what can I do with the herbs that I have externally? What would you get?
I don't know, but I put a big plug in for garlic.
Yeah.
Garlic is antifungal and antibacterial. And you can take that inside, you can do oils with it and steep for 2 weeks, take it internally or put it on top. So
You're right.
that would be my go-to.
And because again, you're looking at what you said, garlic is antibacterial, antifungal. You're right, as long as it's in those categories.
Right.
I personally have other herbs that I like better just because I don't like the smell of the garlic. But you could give garlic tincture, right, internally.
Yep.
And then even if you just have an herbal tincture that you could use internally, if you don't have any essential oils or anything else, you could put dropperfuls of that in a foot bath and be soaking it. Okay. So that addresses the underlying cause. We're addressing the fungal. What if we have just really severe issues? Okay, because you address the underlying cause and the symptoms you're having right. I would put something in the water, the foot bath, for the issue. Look on your list and tell me what category of herbs we would use. Okay. Antihistamines are great if the symptoms are caused by histamines.
By what?
Histamines.
Histamines.
And itching is sometimes a symptom of allergies, and you would use that but antihistamines are going to, that's not fungal related, right? Okay, so this is good to kind of give you an idea of how these categories work and how you would know what to choose. So, I'm going to give you just a minute. There's one category that's near the top that's probably the first thing I would look for.
Itching.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder.
Irritated tissue. Demulcent?
You could use a demulcent or at the top like an anti-inflammatory. There is a category, and maybe I didn't add it because it's one of the ones that I just left off of this, but there are some that are, well, an analgesic 25, pain relief, that also would affect the same nerve endings that are causing the itching. So anything in those, there's a category of herbs that are just like soothing to the skin. So if you were looking in your herbal book, you would see that category.
Mhm.
So basically, the principle is, we've looked at what the underlying cause is, and then whatever the symptoms are. If there's another symptom that's associated with that, we're going to say, okay, the symptom is this, what category would address that? And then we're going to look at herbs that are in those categories. And then that's how you would be able to put together your protocol. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay, we'll move to the next one. Okay, probably everybody. What is the underlying cause? Generally, do we think? We don't they can't tell you, but we kind of generally have some ideas of what are some of the common causes of colic and fussiness.
I think we always, it's digestive.
Mm-hmm. And you can tell, particularly if it's digestive, if the baby's tummy is hard to the touch, or they're like straightening their legs out, you can tell that there's discomfort. So we are going to assume, as a mother, I would always assume that it was something digestive. We're going to assume for our purposes today that we are dealing with something that's in the digestive system. Okay. So underlying cause is what we're going to identify first. What category of herbs would we look at? Carminative, what number is that, Sarah? Okay. Carminative herbs, that's a pretty common category that you would work in a lot just as a home herbalist. And in every category, there are usually herbs that are gentle enough for infants. So chamomile, which is an herb that shows up on many different categories, chamomile and catnip are actually perfect for infants. And you can make tinctures in a glycerin base to give to babies. And it's a little bit sweet and they love it. So I usually give alcohol to adults and my older children. Well, all my children are older now, but for infants and small children, I just tincture the herb in alcohol or in glycerin. And that makes something that is very potent and that the babies will take. Okay, so let's say we use chamomile or catnip. Those are probably the most gentle. That's going to address gas, bloating, and digestive upset. Would we use anything else? It depends on what the symptoms are, right? What are some other symptoms that you might see with a fussy baby? What if they're not sleeping? What if they're fussy and they're not sleeping? What could we add? What could we add to the carminative herbs to make a little blend and put something extra in there to just help them sleep if that's one of the symptoms?
Hypnotics. 15.
Okay. Now hypnotics.
We have to know which lines were.
Yeah. Yes. And so actually I'd look up to 14, which the nervines, they're healing and calming to the nervous system and very soothing. And so what you just said, Virginia, both of those categories do promote sleep, nervines and hypnotics. Mm-hmm. Hypnotics are they're a lot stronger, but that just goes to show that if you just took the time to familiarize yourself with each of these categories, you would be familiar enough with them to be able to say, yeah, hypnotics is not really appropriate for a baby with just mild symptoms, but you would know that, okay, I want to be looking in nervines. So that's really where your education, like just having a good herbal book that talks about the therapeutic categories, just read a section of it. I mean, I just keep herb books by my bed and I just read just a little bit, like a paragraph at night before I go to bed, just to refresh my memory. But that's a really great way to become familiar with these categories. So when you're looking at symptoms, your mind just automatically knows, oh, I'm going to need an anti-inflammatory, I'm going to need an antibacterial, and I'm going to need this. And then you see what herbs you have in stock. One really great way to build up your herbal medicine cabinet is to take a list like this, okay? And every month, just buy one herb or two from each category. So you're collecting single herbs so that you would be equipped to deal with pretty much anything that comes up in your home. That's why, in the last class, I have been the primary care provider for the time that I was raising my kids. Because the things that you go to a primary care provider for, cold and flu, diarrhea, scrapes, bumps, sprains, bruises, pink eye, like just those kind of basic things. You can address every single thing that you would normally take to a primary care provider. I have been to the emergency room a couple times, right? Herbal medicine is not emergency medicine. And I have needed the services of a specialist from time to time, like an ear, nose, and throat doctor and so forth. But as far as primary care, generally, we haven't needed, like, I have kids who the first time they went to the doctor was when they had their mission checkup because it was required, right? So you can just do so much in your home to deal with the regular routine trips to the general doctor just by understanding these principles. Okay, high blood pressure. There is a category that is unique to regulating blood pressure, and that's usually all that's needed. Yep, you're hypotensive. Now, high blood pressure, if you have chronic high blood pressure, it's probably a good idea to understand why. Because if there is an underlying cause, then high blood pressure is not causation, it's just a symptom, and we don't treat symptoms as herbalists. We always want to get to the underlying cause. So if your high blood pressure is connected to some kind of chronic disease, we want to know what that is. But if it's just diet and exercise related, which I guess that's still a symptom, but you can address that without a doctor's diagnosis. Any one of those herbs will help regulate your blood pressure. Now it says reduce blood pressure for hypotensives. Most of these herbs will lower a high blood pressure. They're the same herbs that you'd administer if you had low blood pressure because they're regulators. And so you'll find a lot of the same herbs will act to regulate whatever's imbalanced in that system. So, some of the diarrhea herbs you would also administer for constipation because they will regulate the system. So you'll find as you look at categories that do opposing things, the same herbs are on them because they will regulate that system. Okay, so if I was treating this, I would just pick one of the hypotensives and I'd give it 2 or 3 times a day and watch the blood pressure. Okay, diarrhea. Now that's a tricky one because we don't always know what the underlying cause is. So what are some possibilities? I mean, as a mom, when you see something like this in your kid, what's the first thing you always ask yourself?
What did they eat?
Exactly. Is this food poisoning? Is this food poisoning? Is this the flu? Right? So sometimes you have clues in your family. You all go out to a restaurant and 2 hours later, you all have diarrhea. Like sometimes you can trace those things down. If you suspect it is food poisoning, I usually do not treat diarrhea for the first 24 hours because that's the body's effort to get it out of the system. And we don't want to interfere with what the body's trying to do as long as that's what as long as that's a good thing. So if I strongly suspect it's diarrhea, I'm going to leave it for 24 hours, but I might supplement with some really good electrolytes. So I have this one up here, the Elite electrolytes. That's what athletes use. It does not taste very good. It's not sweetened and it's not flavored. The Elite electrolytes, that's just the brand I use. The point is that you don't want to go and administer Gatorade because that causes all sorts of other problems, especially because there's so much sugar in it. I mean, even Pedialyte is better than what they're marketing as like sports electrolytes. So if there is severe diarrhea, even if I'm not going to try and stop the diarrhea, I'm going to make sure that I'm hydrated and that I'm giving electrolytes. That is a really good thing to have in your emergency preparedness kit. Because if someone is sick, normally if you're really, really sick and you're losing a lot of fluids, they will send you to the hospital and give you an IV with electrolytes in it with saline solution. If there's no hospital to go to, you can keep someone's organs from shutting down by being able to give them electrolytes. So I do have that in my like emergency preparedness stuff. Did you have a question?
No.
Okay. So let's say that we suspect that we're not dealing with food poisoning. What else would cause diarrhea? Okay. Bacterial illnesses will. What else? If it's not a bacteria, it's probably a virus. If I, as a mom, don't know, I'm going to mix up a little formula with an antibacterial herb and an antiviral herb so that I catch both of those. Okay. So I would just assume, so if I'm pulling my herbs out, right, the underlying cause, I'm going to take my tincture and I'm going to start a new little formula that I'm just going to administer for that illness. Put some antibacterial herbs in there, put some antiviral herbs. Okay, so what are the symptoms that we're going to want to address that I'm going to want to add to that formula? What usually is accompanying diarrhea? Okay, so we've got, what's the category that we talked about with colicky babies?
Nervines. No.
That was to help babies sleep. Yeah, we're going to go back. I'm probably going to pull a fermentative herb because that's going to help with gas and bloating and any kind of digestive upset. Anytime I'm doing, it's number 7. Anytime I've got anything going on in the digestive system, I'm going to pull carminative herbs just as a standard. I just do it no matter what. What about cramping and muscle spasm? What category of herbs would I add to address that?
Antispasmodic.
Yes. Antispasmodic herbs for diarrhea do 2 things. Number 1, they'll stop that stomach pain that usually accompanies diarrhea. But number 2, one of the reasons that you have diarrhea is because the waste is moving through the digestive system so quickly that it's not staying in the part of the digestive system that will soak up extra fluids. Because the muscles are pushing it through so fast that it's not stopping where it should stop for those extra fluids to get sucked up. So by giving antispasmodic herbs, you're stopping the spasms that are pushing it through the digestive system too quickly. Okay, so that's actually key for diarrhea. If you're trying to stop it, you want to stop the spasms that are moving it through the body too fast. Okay, I also want to soak up extra fluid. So what category of herbs do we see that will rid the body of extra fluid?
Excess water and
Okay, that diuretics, you're on the right track. Those are usually for water that's being held in the tissues. Like if you've got swelling in your feet and you have someone that has edema, that's when I'd reach for a diuretic.
Okay.
Up towards the top of your list is the category that reduces secretions. Okay. Excess water and diarrhea, that we're going to consider that.
Number 4 is astringent.
Yeah. So that's the same category of herb I would give if somebody had a runny nose that wouldn't stop. Because you want to soak up extra water. We want the body to soak up extra water. So I'm going to add. Okay. So now you can see I have 3 or 4 herbs that I'm throwing into that. If you have additional symptoms, you do the same thing. Okay, what else is going on? Oh, now they have nausea. Okay, I'm going to look here for an herb like an antiemetic that helps with nausea, or a lot of your carminative herbs will help with that. So you just go by the symptom That's why you can have two kids that have the flu. And maybe you're giving them both antiviral herbs. You're not going to be giving them exactly the same thing. Because you're going to fine tune them according to the symptoms that they have.
What did you say that was for, didn't hear the thing you said, sorry, you said it so fast.
Oh, yeah.
Medics.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, it's not on the list. Oh,
And then just for your notes, if you're taking notes, if someone does have nausea that's associated with something like this, you just take a few drops of like peppermint essential oil and put it back on the fleshy part. That's just a little trick that I learned. So as you go, so an ideal herbal, it doesn't exist yet. An ideal herbal book in the Materia Medica, which is where you usually look for what to do for what. Every herbal book has one. You usually open it up and you look up sore throat and it'll give you a long list of herbs, right? That's called the Materia Medica. The reason I hate Materia Medicas is because they'll give you 10 herbs to use for sore throat, but they don't tell you why they're on that list. Some of them are going to be painkillers. Some of them are going to be soothing. Some of them are going to be this or that. And you have no idea how to match those herbs. I mean, it's just random. And then you might use one because, oh, my grandma gave me this and I have it in the cupboard for 5 years and I haven't known what to do with it, but it's on the list, so I'm going to use it. Well, if it's not in a category that's going to address what you're trying to address specifically, it's not going to do what you want it to do. And then you're going to say, oh, I tried herbs once and it didn't work. Well, you didn't understand why you were using what you were using. Okay. So an ideal herb book in the Materia Medica, you would open it up to diarrhea and it would give you a little recipe. You need a carminative. You need an antispasmodic. You need an antiviral if you suspect it's viral. You need an antibacterial. Like you would have a little guide, and then you can say, okay, I need a carminative. I'm going to turn to the section in the book that lists carminatives and I'm going to see what I have. I need an antispasmodic. I'm going to turn to the section in the book and look at antispasmodics and see what I have. But a really helpful herb book, like for bladder infections, there is a formula. You need a demulcent. You need an antibacterial. You need an antispasmodic. And if you can kind of, with experience, learn which categories you kind of want to create your formula out of, then you kind of know where to start and you don't have to like you don't have to start from scratch. You kind of have an idea. So, okay. So yeah, I was just gonna tell what my preferred protocol is. We talked about antispasmodic herbs. I have found cramp bark is an herb that everybody should have in your emergency preparedness because it's an antispasmodic and it stops cramping, but it can be used for very common things like menstrual cramps, diarrhea, like we talked about, any kind of muscle spasms that you have. And Angelica is my favorite. Angelica seed tincture. I have never had to give more than 1 dropper full to stop diarrhea. We kind of already talked about water absorption taking place in the intestines and why antispasmodics would be good just to keep waste from being pushed out of the body so fast, not just relieving the pain that you feel. But you do get better over time. The more familiar you become with the therapeutic actions, it becomes almost second nature to you to know, oh, I need a Nervine. Oh, I need a hypnotic. I need something a little more punch. That just becomes second nature to you. And I have found, as I have learned about herbs, I can feel the spirit helping me to soak it all up, right? Because we learned last time, we talked about some scriptures in the Book of Mormon talking about herbs and plants that the Lord created to remove the cause of disease. He wants us to know how to use these. And so if we embark on a serious journey to really learn how to use the plants that he created, he will help us. And I have felt that in my life, helping me to remember things and to recall information. Because remember, we're told that the Spirit will help us remember things, but it's our job to put those things in our brains, right? So I don't think we should be so overwhelmed about memorizing things. It's just becoming familiar with it. So then the Spirit can have that light bulb go on and be like, oh my gosh, I read about this. I need to remember this. And I have found over the years, when I'm reading about an herb, sometimes I will feel this little voice in the back of my head that says, you know, this is really interesting. You should remember this. I've learned to listen to that because without fail, within days or weeks or months, someone will walk through my door or one of my kids will have something where I need that piece of information. And so I've just learned to expect inspiration and to be able to rely on that. So if this feels overwhelming to you, just take baby steps and just pray for help, because the Lord wants us to know these things. He created them for our benefit.
Are the colors on these significant?
No, I just tried to make it easier to read. No. Nope. Okay. At the time I created this presentation, my dog had gotten caught up in some, I don't know what it was, barbed wire or something. Her laceration was on the side of her body, but it was open, just like this one was. It was just a clean cut. She comes running up to the house. Her side is open. What would you do with that? First of all, with a wound like that, whether it's an animal or person, what is your first concern with an open wound?
Infection.
Okay, that is the first thing. In your emergency preparedness, you have got to have antibacterial herbs. Because in a situation where we have possibly sanitation issues and not an ability to get medical care, even very simple wounds can become infected. And if you can't draw that infection out and it becomes systemic, you're probably going to die. If you become septic, that is life-threatening. So as to be prepared, make sure that you have antibacterial herbs. That's probably more, well, I would have antiviral herbs too, but antibacterial herbs are like right up there, because bacteria, if it's not treated and it becomes systemic, you are in big trouble. And if we're in a situation where we're having to change our sanitation habits and things, I mean, bacteria is just a tremendous concern. But anyway, okay, so I'm putting some drops, antibacterial drops in my doggy's water, and maybe making little treats with putting antibacterial drops in something I can feed the dog. So I'm getting them in internally. What else am I doing to heal this dog?
Well, you need to get the wound closed.
I mean, after you clean it out and stuff. But, and I'm thinking, what was the name of that herb that Michelle said that you put on your brother-in-law?
Blue yarrow essential oil.
Okay.
So for something like this, before I try to close up the wound in any way, I'm going to take probably, well, any herb that is, most herbs have some kind of antibacterial, antiviral properties, like to some degree. So I'm going to take something like yarrow or calendula or something to wash this wound out, or just clean water if I can just get a hold of that. But I'm going to irrigate that really well. You do not want to try to close up a wound if there's any hint of infection, because the herbs that close up wounds will close it up so fast that it holds the infection. So you've got to make sure that you're either getting to the wound before there's infection. If there's infection, there are herbs that you can use. They might be on this list that will actually pull infection out. And plantain. Have plantain. You put plantain on a wound and it will actually pull the infection out. Okay. So if I suspect infection, I'm gonna use plantain and make sure that wound is absolutely infection-free before I try to close it. Otherwise, I'm gonna be dealing with an abscess. But on a fresh wound, I'm gonna clean it out really well. If I've got some good antibacterial herbs, I'm gonna put some of that in the wash and I'm just gonna squirt it on there. Then what am I gonna do? There's gonna be two things I'm probably gonna wanna do. Is it bleeding? If it's bleeding, what am I gonna do? What category of herbs? Okay, those are hemostatic herbs. Somebody tell me a hemostatic herb. Look on your list, find hemostatic herbs.
Yarrow, cayenne,
Okay,
number 27.
okay. Cayenne, everybody wants to have cayenne in their emergency preparedness because it is also a first response to heart attack or stroke.
Now, are you gonna sprinkle the powder, or are you gonna do an herbal tincture?
In cayenne, I'm gonna use whatever I have. If I have a tincture, I'm gonna drop it right in the wound. If all I have is a powder, I'm gonna sprinkle it into the wound. But just while we're talking about cayenne, studies have shown that if someone has a dropper full of cayenne before they're rushed to the hospital because of a stroke or a heart attack, they retain, like it does less vascular damage if it's a heart attack, and they retain more of their, like they have less loss of motor skills and cognitive ability if they've had cayenne immediately. So if you have elderly parents, I mean, I would keep a thing of cayenne in my purse because it will also stop bleeding in a crisis. I've always told people, if I'm in a car accident, I want to go to the emergency room. Don't show up with your little bag of herbs because emergency medicine is appropriate unless you have cayenne in your purse. Give me that before I get up to the hospital because it is the number one crisis herb. But anyway,
Like, I'm curious, do you carry like a little bottle of it in a tincture, like you said, or do you, like, would you say you carry some powdered cayenne would do?
it is in my emergency preparedness kit that goes on every vacation, every camping trip. I don't have it like in my actual purse because I'm like trying to scale down.
Yeah.
So,
But-
what is it, powder or tincture or both?
I like tincture because it maintains its integrity. Remember from our previous class, the things that make herbs degrade is exposure to heat, light, and air. So if you've got a powder, you really have to protect that from oxidizing. I don't like to deal with powders, but speaking of bleeding, one of my mentors is also, he's a master herbalist and a practicing vet. So that's an interesting combination, but when he is operating on his animal patients, he keeps a little bowl of powdered yarrow because it is also hemostatic. He keeps powdered yarrow on the operating table. And if he accidentally nicks an artery and the patient starts like bleeding out, he will sprinkle some of that on the wound and it will stop, like a faucet turned off. That's also we'll talk about bloody noses, but you can stop a bloody nose just like that with yarrow or cayenne. Okay, so we're going to stop the bleeding, right? Yarrow will also draw the edges of a wound together. Okay. And I like to have blue yarrow essential oil on hand to put directly on wounds. It is like I hate to use the word magic and miracle, but sometimes you see these herbs do things and you're just like, that is a miracle. 30 minutes ago, that was a gaping wound. And now literally like the edges have come together and it looks like somebody super glued it. That's a miracle. There's a plant that does that. I mean, it's just, I could talk about herbs all day.
Is this a tincture?
The blue yarrow essential oil, it's an essential oil.
Blue yarrow, does that mean the yarrow flowers were blue, or is it just a term?
So all yarrow comes from the same plant because yarrow.
There's some yellow, there's some.
Yes, I like blue yarrow, and you'll just see, like, especially if you buy from Butterfly Express, they have yellow yarrow, green yarrow, blue yarrow.
Okay.
It's more in the distillation process and how it's extracted. It's not the species of the plant that's different.
Okay.
So
Green yarrow then.
Yes, but blue yarrow, there is something potent about the blue, and it is blue. It is bright blue. There is something that I just think the blue yarrow is more effective than the one that's labeled yellow yarrow or one that's labeled green. So that is just something that we have in our emergency preparedness, the blue yarrow. But if I didn't have essential oil, I'm going to be running in there and I'm going to be looking for my tincture and I'm going to drop that right in the wound. And if I don't have tincture, I'm going to get my dried herbs and I'm going to put it right in there. The point is you're getting it in your body. It doesn't always matter if you drink it or if you make a tea or if it's this or that. I know people that will take the powdered herb that they just powdered themselves, put a couple tablespoons of it in a glass of water and down the hatch. You just have to get it in your body. Okay. So we've stopped bleeding, we understand how to address infection. What can I put on the herb or on the wound to make new skin grow? How can I actually stimulate the body to repair damaged tissues? There's a category for them.
I think it's comforting.
Yeah, it is. Comfrey is the superstar. It's yes. Comfrey is, if all you had was comfrey, that's all you would need.
What number?
It is number 30.
30.
So I'm hoping that as we go through this exercise, that you are understanding the value of being familiar with the therapeutic actions and what they do. Because that's really the key to unlock everything. And then if you know that you're treating underlying cause first and then the symptoms, you see how it starts to come together. So you kind of know what to do.
I'm curious what you did with your dog, because did the dog not need stitches? You were able to treat it?
Oh yeah.
Well, and I was like,
So actually, we didn't have to go to the vet because there was not enough skin
Oh.
to close. It had
Oh, okay.
ripped off on the fence,
oh,
and so it was, there was.
so it's too
it
wide.
was too wide.
Mhm.
And so we did get as close as we could, but there was only so much, and also how deep it was.
Okay.
And that is a great illustration of common sense,
Mhm.
right? Like we want to take care of things ourselves and we want to be self-reliant, but using herbs is one of the resources that we have, and we can do a lot with just herbs. But common sense, like sometimes you do need to go to the doctor or to the emergency room, and so it's not all or nothing with herbs, right? We just want to incorporate that into all the other good things that we have. Okay, bloody nose. We already talked about this. You see, I have two daughters here in the front row. What do we do for bloody nose? Okay, she says blue yarrow and she says cayenne. What is the commonality between those two? They're hemostatic. Okay, in fact, Brooke had a weak vessel in her nose that would always break. Every time she went underwater, she'd start having a bloody nose. So I just did a little bit of research and I said, this sounds to me like it's just a weak vessel. Okay, cayenne rebuilds vein structure. So I just said, let's just see if we can strengthen, because I had people telling me, oh, you need to go have that cauterize and then it'll never bleed again. Okay, I mean, we probably would have done that had the herbs not worked, but we gave cayenne, not just when she had bloody noses, but because we were trying to rebuild that vein structure and strengthen the vein structure. And she hasn't had a bloody nose since.
How did you apply the
Yeah.
cayenne?
I don't remember. Do you remember?
Just on with a dropper.
So you were taking it orally? Okay.
Not like you didn't.
That's what I was thinking, that I drop on it Q-tip and just down it inside the nose or That's what we something. do with blue yarrow. You take some tissue paper or whatever, you put some blue yarrow.
Yeah.
And stick it up there.
Because blue yarrow is not hot.
Yeah.
But my kids, well, we add it to a little bit of apple juice. And so I would get phone calls from the elementary school. We have your child in here that has a bloody nose. They didn't want me to call you, but I'm calling you because we don't know what to do. And I'm like, well, the reason they don't want you to call me is because I'm going to come down there with my little bottle of cayenne and I'm going to make them drink it and some apple juice. They don't like it because it's hot, but it will make a bloody nose stop within like 2 minutes.
Also, to dive down cayenne, you can take hot water. You just turn your faucet on the hot and.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's also true with alcohol tinctures. You're worried about the amount of alcohol. You can just add it to a little bit of hot tap water and it can work well. And just to keep that in perspective, when you are using tinctures, alcohol-based tinctures, alcohol is a very potent menstruum to draw that off. We're talking dosages in drops. Like you have a dropper full, okay, the average dose of an alcohol tincture is 10 to 20 drops. That's not even a half. So you think about how, like, if you're dosing alcohol-based cold medicine over the counter, like NyQuil, okay, the dose for that is usually like 4 tablespoons, right? So you get more alcohol in an over-the-counter cold medicine dosage than you would by using your own home brewed alcohol tincture. So
What do
because
you use for an alcohol base?
I use 80 proof vodka or 100 proof. Actually, 80 proof will work for pretty much anything except barks, really tough roots, and resinous plants like milk thistle and stuff actually pull that up better in 100 proof. And I have videos talk about how to make tinctures. It's super easy. Okay, so bloody nose, you're gonna grab a hemostatic. Did you have a question?
No, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, we talked about this already. If you have frequent nosebleeds, you need to find out why. Is there an underlying cause? Because if something's chronic, we don't want to just keep treating the symptom. We need to find out why that's there and then address that. And that's sometimes why when you have a doctor's diagnosis can be very helpful. You know, and when I have clients that come to me with really complex, multi-layered things, the first question I will usually ask them is, what is your doctor's diagnosis? So at least we have some kind of basis for an underlying cause, so we kind of know where to start working. So, I mean, I'm not anti-medicine. There are some really valuable things that can come from your doctor. Okay, internal bleeding from any source. Doesn't matter if you've had a fall or you have bleeding ulcers or anything internally. We've talked about this category 3 times already. What stops bleeding? Hemostatics. Okay, so that's when, again, if you're coming to the scene of an accident and you suspect there's internal bleeding, it would be very appropriate with the permission of the victim to if you've got cayenne, yarrow, shepherd's purse. This is also what we use if we have a mother that's bleeding out after childbirth. If she's hemorrhaging, hemostatics will save her life.
How do you, what form is the cayenne? I just know cayenne pepper, you know, in a little shaker.
I buy whole cayenne peppers and chop them up. Usually if you're going to tincture herbs, you want chopped herbs, not powders, because it's very difficult to strain a powder out, and then you get these little granules that clog up your droppers. So I don't like to use like culinary cayenne. First of all, I have no idea how long it's been sitting powdered on the shelf. Like I said, like we've talked about, if that's all you have, you can reach in your cupboard and drop that in, you know, put a teaspoon in something and drink it, or drop it into a wound. But I will buy,
with liquid.
it's highly recommended. I mean, for cayenne, especially, just because of the heat, I like heat. I don't mind it. You know, and cayenne, oh, it's good for so many things. If you ever get strep throat, the most soothing thing in the world is to take a mixture of honey and water and cayenne, and you sip it, and it will deaden all of those nerve endings that are on fire when you have strep throat. It is cayenne. Everybody should have medicinal cayenne in their homes.
You said honey.
Cayenne, water, and some people, I do add apple cider vinegar. That's what the recipe calls for, but that's not the mechanism of action is not in the apple cider vinegar. Okay, so are you getting an idea of how important hemostatic herbs are? We've talked about that category of herbs for several different common things, right? And emergency preparedness things. I'm gonna go till 12:30. That's what I put on the thing. Are we all okay with that? If you need to leave, remember this is going to be recorded. Okay, coughing. You're going to use very different herbs depending on what you want to accomplish. Because think about how many coughs there are. There's the dry hacking cough. There's the deep cough where you can tell that your lungs are clogged with something, but it's so deep you can't, it's unproductive. There's a very productive cough where you are be able to expectorate, but so you want to support that. Okay. Depending on what you're trying to accomplish will determine which category you go for. If you have a dry, hacking, spasmodic cough, spasmodic, it's keeping you up at night, there's two things you're going to want to do. You're going to want to stop the spasms, and you're going to want something that is soothing to those dry tissues. So you're going to use an antispasmodic, and then you're going to look at a demulcent herb, something like marshmallow, or something that is very soothing. So usually we don't want to stop coughing because the body's trying to get something out. So I'll just give those calming herbs like the antispasmodic ones just to kind of calm the cough so that you can sleep at night. But during the day when you're up, you need to be emptying out those lungs. So what category would you use? What category would you use to expectorate mucus? That's a big clue. Yes. Ah, an anti-control. Yes.
Charles, is that how you say it?
You're right. And an expectorant. Most of us are familiar with the term expectorant because that's what the labels in the grocery store, on the drugstore say, right? For the expectorating cough syrups. Cough syrups, commercial cough syrups, expectorants or suppressants. Your herbs will do the same thing depending on what you want to do. So yeah, I would combine category 2 and category 3. One thing I will tell you about respiratory things is when COVID first came out, I was watching those symptoms very carefully so that I could be prepared to deal with whatever the symptoms arose. And one of the symptoms that was causing the most respiratory distress is that people's lungs would fill up and they would not be able to breathe. That's why people were being intubated, because they had inflammation in the respiratory system and really thick, deep, heavy mucus. And so I kind of felt like the normal herbs that I use might not be what I would want for this particular thing. And I remember one day I was in the temple and I was in the dressing room and I was just pondering it. I was just thinking, what do I use? And I just said, Heavenly Father, what would I treat this respiratory thing with if we came up with those really severe respiratory symptoms? And the Spirit said to me, as clear as day, lobelia and gumweed. So as soon as I got home, I am looking up those herbs and reminding myself what they do. This is something that you should probably have in your notes. Lobelia is a bronchial dilator. It is the premier asthma herb. I probably would not have thought of using that in a case where you had lung congestion, where you were dealing with fluid or mucus. I wouldn't have thought of using an asthma herb. Okay, lobelia, bronchial dilator, and gumweed. Gumweed is an antispasmodic and an expectorant. There is nothing better at getting into a system that is bogged down with mucus and pulling it out than gumweed. In fact, we had an experience with Brooke. Can I share this? She had, I don't know if she had COVID. She had something that was in her lungs. She was getting short of breath just by trying to rearrange her blankets and reach for her Kleenex. And when I went to talk to her about it, she just said, her lungs were so bogged down, but it was so thick and just deep that it was not productive. It was weighing heavily, and I was watching her get short of breath, just trying to move around. And she said, I'm on the verge of going to the emergency room because I can't breathe. So what did I give you? And how long did it take for the mucus to be gone?
It was pretty quick. I feel like it was like within an hour, but I definitely felt those heavy.
Okay. I mean, she went from considering an emergency room visit to now she can breathe comfortably. So gumweed, remember that one. And I just feel like, did they need something?
They just, the lunch is already now, but.
Okay.
But I said, you're 12:30, so I'll keep things warm for you.
Okay. It's actually going to be kept warm until 2.
Okay.
So we're good. Okay. So coughing, if it's caused, there's usually either a bacterial or a viral under cause. So you're definitely going to address that. And then you're going to look at the symptoms. What specifically do I want to do? Do I want to stop spasms? If there's dryness, add marshmallow or some other demulcent. Comfrey is a fantastic demulcent. So you're, again, underlying cause, what symptoms? That's why you can have 2 children that you're treating where you're not going to use the same herbs. If one of them's hacking along and it's just this dry hacking cough, but then your other child, needs help, whatever the difference is, you're going to look at each case individually and fine tune the herbs for the symptoms that are manifesting right now. And when the symptoms change, the herbs change, right? It's symptoms you're having right now. Okay. Now we're getting into seeing the same categories that we've already talked about used again for different applications. Excessive menstrual bleeding. I'm going to use, yeah, because that's an astringent. Okay. You have Ursi. That is that on the, it should be on the, yep, it's on, I'm going to use the hemostatic herb. And there's usually, your menstrual cramps, that's a spasm. So cramp bark, there's nothing better than cramp bark. That is a superstar in the antispasmodic category. Yeah, red raspberry, anytime you have anything going on in the female reproductive system, red raspberry leaf is often referred to as God's gift to women because it strengthens and tones the entire reproductive system. I know midwives that will not deliver a mother at home unless she has drunk a cup of red raspberry leaf tea every day because it strengthens the uterus so that when those contractions start, they're fast and effective and the body does what it's supposed to do. And you don't have these long drawn out labors with uterine inertia because that muscle gets tired. You've toned the muscle during pregnancy. So red raspberry leaf.
Any question?
Yes.
I have lots of raspberries.
Okay.
Can I use those raspberries?
The leaf, yes.
So,
100%.
okay.
And do you go grapes too? Okay, grape leaf is a fantastic, amazing antiviral.
Okay, so I can just harvest those, dry those, and make.
Yes. Now, as far as harvesting goes, you want to harvest the plant at the time when whatever part you're after, you want to take that plant part when the plant is sending the energy to that part. So if you're going to harvest raspberry leaves, what time of year do you think you want to do it?
I would do it before the fruit sets.
That's right. Because as soon as
And
the plant's not sending energy to the leaves, it's sending energy to the fruit. You want to harvest the plant part when the plant is sending the vital energy to that part that you want.
So do we want young leaves or can they be more mature leaves, but it hasn't fruited out yet? What would you think?
My guess is that I would take in the spring or early summer leaves off of first year canes. Because the first year cane.
Growing
Yes,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
second year canes are
Oh,
the ones that are,
they're
well, and they're setting fruit,
Oh, yeah,
So-
that's right.
right? So first year, the plants don't even set fruit. That's when I'm gonna want to take those leaves.
Okay.
And I want it when when they look the most beautiful, they're leafing out and they're nice and green and healthy, that's when I'm gonna go out and harvest them. Also,
They dry, do you dry them or do you use them? Like, I have no idea when you put them in your.
So- I actually prefer to use dried herbs. I'm not really good at wildcrafting things. The reason I don't, but in an emergency,
Wildcrafting means
going out and picking it
starting
fresh. So the reason is, if you have it in your yard, by all means, go take it. But when when I make tinctures, because I am treating, like I can't treat, so I'm not a doctor. I am suggesting, when I'm working with someone, I need my tinctures to be, the dosage has to be uniform. When you are using fresh plant matter, there's water in that. And so when I'm figuring my potency and my doses, I have 80% alcohol, like 80 proof alcohol. I know what the water content is. I know how much of the active constituents each drop holds. Adding fresh plant matter that has water in it is going to throw off my calculations. You don't have to worry about that if you're just working with your family. But whereas I work professionally, every drop of every tincture that I make has to be the same if it were ever to be analyzed under, like it has to be uniform. So if I tell someone to take 10 drops of something, I have to know how much medicine is in that 10 drops versus how much water. So for uniformity purposes, I prefer to work with dried because there's no variables. But for just what you're making with your family, if you have fresh, I would probably use a few more drops because you're diluting it with the extra water.
Might be a little diluted because of the water.
Yes,
And
and so
and then.
Yeah.
you could do that. And I'm not trying to I'm not trying to say don't use your fresh stuff. Because if you had tincture made with fresh and you knew there was a little bit of extra water, you just would use more drops. Just in a clinical setting, that doesn't really work because
Easier to do.
I just need it to be the same every time.
When you go outside and harvest it, it's easier to dry it and then do
Right.
that way.
And you can't store it fresh. So if you dry it, you use some to make your tincture and then you put the rest in your storage. Just a word with menstrual cramps and bleeding, if you're taking astringent herbs, which is like yarrow, so you'd be using an anti-spasmodic for cramps, hemostatic to slow down bleeding, and I would add an astringent in there. If you're using astringent herbs, that makes the inside of the uterus very toned and very tight, and it will shorten the duration of your period dramatically because it takes longer for the body to clean itself out if those tissues are soggy and boggy and not really tight. And the astringent will tighten those tissues so that the menstruation process is more effective and the body completes the clean out cycle. So you can so if you have long periods or you just don't want a 10-day period, you can shorten that just by using astringent herbs and make those tissues nice and firm and tight so that it's not holding all the fluid, and then your body has to work harder to clean out everything that it's trying to clean out.
So you're saying that you can use it because in my mind, I think stopping the bleeding, maybe that's like keeping you from getting rid of that.
So
Your lining, but you're saying that you'll still get rid of the lining. Just more
yes.
effectively.
So the great thing about herbs is that it's very difficult to do harm. If you were to stop the natural process and stop that clean out process, that would be doing harm.
Mm-hmm.
Because your body, remember, herbs were created for our use, right? So they've been created with wisdom. They will never override your body's natural processes. So you can't, it's very hard to take too many herbs because the body just treats it as nutrition. and it's very hard to do harm like that.
Mhm.
You know, it does pay to do some research,
Mhm.
and you'll find that, you know, if you just type in what herbs are good for menstrual bleeding, there is such a long history. There's probably so many articles that would come up for you just to double check, you know,
Mhm.
just to kind of educate. I still do that now, you know, just if there's something I'm like, would it be a good idea to use this for this? But generally speaking, you don't have to worry about stopping a natural process, because the herbs are designed to support the body in doing what it's supposed to be doing. That's like with fever. And we'll talk about that a little bit. So cold and flu, you know, we've kind of already talked about this. Underlying cause, there's usually only two.
Viral or I mean.
Viral or bacterial. So, and if I don't know which one it is, I'm gonna give both. That's why the infection fighters that I'm gonna recommend, I have a standby infection fighter. It's a blend of about 7 or 8 herbs. And I buy it already ready to make in a tincture. I don't even put the recipe together myself, and I'll show you how you can do that. But if with an infection fighter, because we don't often know the cause, you want to use a blend that has enough herbs in it to cover all your bases. And then just the symptoms that you're having. Is that kind of becoming easier to you to think of, okay, underlying cause, what do I do once I kind of know what it is? Symptoms, how would I go about figuring out, right? I mean, is that not so foreign as maybe it was before we had this conversation? Seasonal allergies. What's the underlying cause of a seasonal allergy?
Yeah, you're producing histamine.
You're having a histamine response.
Histamine response.
Where in the body does that take place? Do we know?
No.
It's in your liver.
In your liver.
So I'm going to take antihistamine herbs, and we were looking at that category earlier. Okay. Nettles and Brigham tea are natural antihistamines. Can you imagine? Do you know what happens to you when you take over-the-counter antihistamines? Like, you can't keep your eyes open. But the herbs have that therapeutic action without the side effect. It's just fantastic.
I have a big nettle plant if anybody wants.
Nettle. Oh, nettle. I just love. So okay. So those are the underlying causes, right? So, and usually, in addition to using antihistamine herbs, I'm going to use herbs that cleanse the liver, because the histamine response takes place in the liver. So I'm going to see hepatics. What number are you looking at?
Number 10.
Those are typically liver restoratives. I'm going to do that if somebody has like liver disease or they've done liver damage. What's that?
Looks like you got some sticky fingers.
I don't know.
I found cleavers in my backyard too.
Cleavers is an amazing,
It's an interesting little plant.
what is, oh my gosh, I'm having a
Because
brain.
it's like a Velcro, yeah.
Yes.
Cleavers is one of the only herbs that will move your lymph. Lymphatic fluid generally you need exercise, because you don't have a system like, you know, your heart, you have a pump that will move your blood throughout your body. Your lymphatic system has to circulate, but there's no internal circulation system. So usually you need exercise, right, to move your lymphatic, except cleavers will cleanse your lymph. So just so you know. Okay, so seasonal allergies, I'm going to cleanse the liver. I'm going to use antihistamines, and then I'm going to treat whatever symptoms there are. Okay, if you do suffer from seasonal allergies, we're not talking about homeopathics today. That's a whole nother class of therapeutics, but there is a homeopathic remedy called Apis. The first word is Apis. You'll have to look up, but it will stop the runny nose and the itchy eyes and all the things that kind of come with allergies. If you know that you have seasonal allergies, you want to start taking antihistamines and cleansing your liver like 2 weeks before allergy season starts, and you won't have any allergies, generally speaking. Okay. So I'm going to start moving through these a little bit faster. So I'm just, now that you're kind of familiar, right, and we don't have to go through the thing because you're kind of getting the hang of it. Bladder, UTI infections, underlying cause is usually bacterial. Anytime you're doing anything in the bladder, you're using demulcents because those tissues become inflamed, and the herbs that we use can dry out those tissues. So I always add marshmallow to every bladder issue. Antispasmodic, and sometimes you can get mucus. And so I like to use gumweed. In fact, Uva ursi is it's an astringent. It stops bleeding. Sometimes you'll have blood in the urine, and it is antibacterial. And so I usually just give Uva ursi and marshmallow, and that's all that's needed. Kidney stones. There is a class of herbs called antilithics. Lithic means stones. They will dissolve kidney stones. It takes the sharp edges off the kidney stone so that it can pass without pain. And then you might also need an antispasmodic, depending on what kind of pain you're.
People, I'm curious, because I've had kidney stones and they're so horrible.
Yes,
Oh, yeah,
and you add turmeric to it and it will dissolve gallstones.
gallstones and kidney.
In fact, so for kidney stones, there is a blend. I'm going to talk about this book. There is a blend that has a bunch of other things in it. There are a couple of other herbs you could add to that, but the parsley root and gravel root are the ones that will dissolve the kidney stones, and they work. It works. Acne is usually a liver problem. When I have teenage acne issues, we always work on the liver first. We're not going to talk about that. Okay. Are there questions? Do we need to talk? There's going to be a link for this class. So I'm just going to, okay. Here's just a few, because you have access to this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time as I go through these slides. I'm just going to tell you that there's information here if you need to come back to this. Here's a tried and true, I've done it a couple times, addressing stomach ulcers. Okay, this is where I would come. So this information is going to be there. Shingles, we can address the pain, but there's also things that will travel along the nerve and kill the virus where it's lying dormant. That's why shingles and things like that continue to have outbreak that's stress related, is because the virus goes into the body and lies dormant until something stresses it out. But if you can get something that will travel along those nerve endings where the virus lies dormant, you can get it out of the body. So we've got a shingles protocol. Arthritis, either rheumatoid or osteoarthritis, different underlying cause, so some different herbs. I have healed cavities. In the first presentation, I talked about my experience of going to the doctor's office and putting that to the test, the dentist's office. In fact, it was both of you guys. So we've done that. It works. We have x-rays to prove it. I've treated eczema several times with just omega-3, 6, and 9 oils. There is nothing that hurts more than a dental abscess. Have you ever had something where it was a dental emergency and you needed to go in and have like a root canal? I mean, I tell you, I think that pain is worse than childbirth. And there's nothing you can do. Well, I used to think there was nothing you can do. You make a tea of equal parts of cleavers because it moves the lymph. Echinacea is antibacterial, and calendula, and it will clear up the infection in that abscess. I have tried it. You may still need to go to the dentist later down the road if you've got something there that's keeping it from healing completely, but it gets you out of that emergency mode where you think you're going to die. Because if you've ever had that kind of pain, you know, it is so painful. I could do a whole class on labor and delivery. I could tell you some really fun things, but we're out of time for today. There are some pressure points that I've used I've been on the birth team for a couple of home births. I've seen these in action. So there's things you can do herbally there. And why should you never give children's Tylenol or ibuprofen to stop a fever? We did talk about this in our first class. Okay, can you just see if anyone else, I know you know all the answers to this. Why is that a bad thing to do? It kind of
Well, it masks what's going on, and then you don't know why they're getting the fever, and it stops what the body's trying to naturally do.
that's
Bad for the liver.
yeah. So basically, we don't realize we're tuned to think of fever as a symptom. Oh, I'm sick. I have a fever. I need to treat that symptom. Fever is actually your immune response. When your body knows that it's being invaded by an organism, it raises the temperature a little bit to try and kill the invading pathogen. That's one of the multi-layered things that your immune system is designed to do. If you take something like this, it actually tells the cells to behave differently, and it turns off the immune response. We don't want to do that. Like, we don't want to do that. It reprograms the cells and turns off the immune response. So there are different categories of herbs, depending on whether you want to encourage a fever, which you generally do, or if the immune system is too strong, which can happen. Sometimes a natural fever will get too high, and there are febrifuge herbs that you can use to work with the body. It's not reprogramming anything. It's not doing any harm. It's still working with the immune system, but it will cool the body down naturally. So that's just kind of an example of the difference between what we're used to doing with over-the-counter remedies and what we can do with herbs. That sometimes you can get the same relief from things, but we're not doing the same thing to the body behind the scenes. We're working with the natural body processes. Okay. This presentation is available, like just the slides, not just as part of the recording, but you can go through each slide. And if you wanted to go back and take notes. I will tell you quickly that there's two kind of ways that you can approach this as an easy way to get started. One, you can buy one herb, like find out the superstars in every category and just buy one of those, or a couple of them every month. So eventually you have one herb in every category so that you can do what we've done here today and kind of fine tune everything. My favorite herb book is this one from Butterfly Express. She was one of my mentors. I actually went down several month period and spent several days at a time just learning herbs. But what she has already, how I said there's little formulas, for this, you needed it to spasmodic, you needed this and this and this. Well, she's already done it. And so one of the things that I did is there's a page in her book where she has all of these formulas. Okay, all formulas are representations of different categories to accomplish specific purposes. So what I did is I just got the book and I went through and I read about every formula, so I knew what was available, already made, and I just wrote in the little margin what it does. Have something, kidney stones. Is there a formula that's already made for kidney stones? Oh yeah, here it is, I wrote it down. So then that way it saves me the trouble of having to put together my own thing. So if you buy herbs from this work, the Butterfly Express, it gives you the recipe. You put the recipe together to make some of these formulas have like so sometimes I have most of these formulas in my home for the easy. You can buy them from her, pictured and ready to go. You can look at the recipe and source your own individual herbs and make your own formulas. Or you can buy the dry herb pack, a little foil pack that's already formulated. The recipe's already in there. The label thing, you put it in the mason jar, pour alcohol over it, and so there's several paths forward, shortcuts to being able to have these herbs in your home in a usable, practical way that you will actually use. Whatever you do, please get it. This is one that I use every day. This is the new version of it. In the first class, talk about some of the problems with common herb books and why your favorite herb book might have so much information on Chinese herbs, not enough information on the therapeutic categories, that it might not be the best herb book that you can have. You want to look for herb books that have common herbs that grow in our area and that talk about the therapeutic categories so that you can learn about how those herbs interact with the body. Okay. This is
This is yours.
this is my website where I'm posting. This document is there. Both of these herb classes that we've done as part of this series will be posted there. The PowerPoint will be there. And I have also created a longer, more in-depth document, several pages long, with every therapeutic action, what that does, when you would use it, you know, when you would reach for it, and then the best herbs in that category. That's gonna also be there. So all you really need to know from here is this website to take you there. And then at the bottom, it says Relief Society Herb Class. All the handouts, everything is going to be on that link. Okay.
Oh, good, I'm glad you.
Yeah,
Great.
so
You put it up to the website.
yes. And in fact, why don't we, so that I can, there, this one, and then that way, just write that. So if you can just get to this website, scroll down on the side where it says Relief Society Herb Class, everything that we've talked about or referred to is going to be there. Okay, can I move on? Are you still? Okay. All right. Virginia, will you read this for us?
And there were some who died with fevers, which at some seasons of the year were very frequent in the land, but not so much so with fevers, because of the excellent qualities of the many plants in the roots which God had prepared to remove the causes of disease, to which men were subject to by the nature of the climate. Alma 46.
So whether or not herbal medicine is a valid field of study is a moot point because the scriptures tell us that it is. We know that Heavenly Father has prepared these things for our use, not just to address symptoms, but I love the fact that it does emphasize that we're removing the cause of disease so that the body can heal. Heavenly Father loves his plants and he knows all about each one of them. He will help us learn and he will help us remember this knowledge when we need it. So I had a friend who was talking to me about, she said that she was reading in Daniel, how, you remember the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and the boys, the Hebrew boys that were brought into the king's court, and he wanted them to eat of the king's meat. And if you remember what Daniel said, he said, we just want to eat a diet of pulse. So what is pulse? Do you guys know what that is? It's nuts and seeds and things that come from the earth, right? Yeah. Things that the Lord created, right, for our bodies. And, you know, we know that the story goes that the eunuch that was in charge of these boys did not want them to do that because he said, I am in charge of keeping you healthy. If you start looking sickly and weak, the king is going to kill me. So he did not want to make any accommodations for the boys. And Daniel issued this famous 10-day challenge where he said, let us eat pulse for 10 days. And you will see that at the end of that 10 days, we will look better and we will just be healthier because of that diet. And the record tells us that that is in fact what happened, that those boys looked healthier and they were healthier than those who were eating the king's meat. So my friend shares this experience about how she was just pondering, what is it about Pulse that is so good? And she said that she heard a voice in her heart and in her mind that said, I put love in my seeds. And that has always stood out to me because that has application to herbal medicine too, because we're using plants to heal the body. And so to think that we're using something that has power in it, that is beyond what you could see in a microscope, and it is a power that is beyond something that can be identified in a scientific laboratory, that there is a power there. And I have felt that power come into my life. You know, we know that all forms of life are to fill the measure of their creation and experience joy, right? All forms of life. That tells me that everything under creation that is alive has some sort of intelligence to it. If you can feel joy and experience joy, there has to be some sort of intelligence. I can absolutely testify to you that as I have worked with these plants, I have felt that intelligence communicate with me. I have stood in front of my herbal cabinet wondering, what should I use? And I have felt these little intelligences just, you know, pick me, you know, this is what I want to do, because that's the measure of their creation. They're created for the purpose of bringing us joy and helping us heal our bodies and, you know, all the things that we can do with good foods and plants and herbs and nuts and seeds. That is the measure of their creation is. And I just really have a testimony that there is intelligence there, that we can be in tune with that. And that's also the same intelligence that there are scientists cannot identify how some of these herbs do what they do. Like demulcent herbs, the herbs that soothe inflamed tissues. There are scientific studies that say there is no reason that marshmallow should soothe inflamed tissues in the urinary tract, because when you take it internally, it doesn't come into direct contact with any of those tissues. But the studies prove that it does somehow, through mechanisms that is not explained by science. Those herbs do affect those tissues, even though they can't identify scientifically the pathway that it does that. There is power there, power that we don't understand. And like I said earlier, the Lord knows these little plants, and he knows what they're capable of, and he knows what they were created for. And we can draw that power into our lives by asking for his help as we learn about these things. And I just pray that you guys find joy on your journey and learning about these things. It will change your life. This is the one thing that I'm just really passionate about because it has done so much good. And so I just going to close with that. Thank you for being here. If you have any questions, I can talk to you after class, but I've used more than my time. So thank you for your patience, and I'm going to stop recording.